It's JIMBO times. Mariah Castañeda, it is so cool and such an honor for me to hop on this installment of JT the LA Storyteller podcast with you. And first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I worked today and then I took a little nap before I came over here, so I'm doing good.
Power nap. Shout out to the siesta.
Yes.
So, for those of y'all who don't know, Mariah is the host of none other than LA Taco, as well as Neon Hum Media's The Sellout, which some of you all might know about, but which many of you probably don't. And so we're going to get into that today for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super honored.
But before we get into all of this, Mariah, I want to ask you a little bit about your side of LA, your side of Southern California. Tell me about this place for you. Where do you hail from originally? Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's actually a really complicated question for me. I grew up in the Inland Empire, the San Gabriel Valley, and Huntington Park. But my earliest memories are in the Mojave Desert in Adelanto with my grandpa. I lived with him over there for some years. Then we moved over to the San Gabriel Valley. And then after that, when I was like 13, I moved to Huntington Park. And yeah, I don't know. When I moved over there, that's really, really felt a sense of like, if I needed anything, your neighbors always had you. Your friends always had you. I used to run cross country. I ran track. And I like to go, running I wanted to go running on the weekends sometimes. And then my friends would be like, okay, I'll go ride my bike with you while you run. And I think there I really learned a sense of community and, I don't know, just people looking out for one another.
And so that's in Adelanto, you were saying?
That's in Huntington Park.
Oh, in Huntington Park.
Huntington Park.
Okay, very good.
And Adelanto kind of has a similar vibe, too, where all the neighbors know each other. I would say a lot of folks, might have come from LA and then got pushed out over there. So I think maybe that's why there's a similar vibe.
I think that's entirely accurate. I really appreciate that reading, and it is something I hope to get increasingly more familiar with. That is the landscape of California and the way that the Mojave Desert is this place that ends up being home for a lot of people who may start out in the bigger cities like LA. And you said that your grandpa was a big part of this story just as well, right?
Yeah, so I lived in Adelanto with my grandpa when I was like a little kid. He actually got me into news. He would get the LA Times over there, so he'd always sit me on his lap, and he'd always be like, "Oh, Mija, you should go read this to me." And I'd be like, "Okay," so I would just read it to him. I'd want it to be helpful, and that's how I got to learn about things happening, and then I got really into news because of that, and like who gets to tell stories, right? But the desert, it's back then we were like there was like only 3 houses. We were like the last 3 houses before it was just desert. So we would just go walk in the desert once the sun was like setting a bit. It was really pretty. You could see the mountains. The mountains looked purple. Like the ground was like all gold when the sun would be setting and like hitting it just right. Yeah, I think that's something that like I really think about a lot. I think about like reading the LA Times with my grandpa and then thinking. And I also, what I loved about it over there is that I liked how people just kind of did what they wanted. So you go to Domino's over there and like you can only get specific items, like specific kind of like cheesy ball bread thing, whatever. Like they made it like that. Or you wanted to go to like a grocery store, like they would still have like bundles there, even though the store is down at that same like grocery store may not have it down the hill. Because They had this idea that like, well, no one's gonna tell us what to do over here. We'll just do what we want to do,
Right.
So like, it's this idea that we're gonna make these like businesses the way we want to make them. We're gonna make them more Mexican. We're gonna make it more for our communities.
Right. They don't have the same regulations that they would in the big city.
I guess so. I don't know. It's just like kind of how I remember. So I would go down the hill and I'd be like, wait, why are things different? But yeah. So. And then my grandpa, when he came here from Mexico, and then when my family, like they were originally in LA, they were like in Huntington Park area and Southeast LA area. And then they moved over to Adelanto, I think, I don't actually know when, but when before I was born.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what I recall, Adelanto is also the place of this detention facility. I believe I remember hearing about the Adelanto Immigration Center at some point.
Yeah, I've actually reported on it too. It's actually one of the worst it's actually one of the worst detention centers. And let me think about this.
Sure.
It's actually one of the worst detention centers. And I think in general in that area, there are a lot of like there are a lot of detention centers, or there's a detention center. There's also like prisons and jails over there too. So there is a lot of like incarceration.
Right. And whole networks that rely on the ecosystem there, on the economic impact of those detention centers there. Because I know and have also read about rural towns being pitched on the prospects of a new detention facility in their community because of the possibility of jobs and more income and perhaps a better quality of life for them overall, which is an ironic thing to consider, the fact that someone else's incarceration could lead to the betterment of your own quality of life. But like, that's something that has been pitched to and something that has won out in certain rural parts of this state in California. So it's fascinating that you've got this other side to it where like, this is a place for your family. This is a place where you all sort of spent critical years together, where you picked up your love for newspapers together. And lo and behold, all this time later, you mentioned that you actually reported on Adelanto too.
I did. I think what I witnessed at that detention center, I've done 2 stories on it back when I was an intern over at Fusion. They didn't let me go inside, but I reported on a hunger strike that was happening. One of my friends, somebody that he knew was, I was able to do some reporting on that and on the hunger strikes. They also play a lot of like manipulation and like mind games on people. So like, for example, when I was reporting on it and I was talking to families that were waiting to go inside to go talk to their loved ones, basically they were being told that they wouldn't be allowed to see their family members until the reporter left. So I had to leave because I wasn't going to get in between people seeing their family members. But yeah, I've never heard of that happening before.
Right. And I think what I also understand, or what this brings to mind, is that it's a private detention facility. So because it's a private detention facility, they don't have to abide by the same laws and regulations that most so-called public institutions of that sort do on a regular basis. So
yeah, it was owned by Geo Group actually. And you're right. I don't want to speak too much on politics over there because I am not as informed as I used to be, but definitely there would be like, it's like how you were saying earlier, there would be like these private corporations that would make these pitches to, towns that are more rural. It would just kind of go really deep. Yeah, I think it's because part of it's also because cruelty is the point. So it's this idea that you're going to put somebody like super far away from their family. So you have to go up past the Cajon Pass, right? And you have to go past like the mountains to go see your loved ones, like in this really remote, far away area. The other thing I think is really interesting though about this detention center is that Adelanto it's a Mexican community. It's a Latino community. Most of the people there are Latino, right? And that's not how it is in like all of the high desert. Like there's some places that aren't as Latino. So I think that's kind of like something that I always find kind of strange about the area.
right.
I will say that I think there's always been different kinds of industries. So I think for a minute it was like the weed industry over there. But for my grandpa, they built boats, they built yachts over there. There was a yacht yard over there where there now is like there's like a yacht yard. So my grandpa would build yachts, he would build boats. And he felt like he was a privileged person because
Sure.
he got his pension and everything, building boats. I think he'd even come home with pieces of like the boats. He'd be like, "Oh, Mia, look at this. They're using fiberglass," and I'd be like, "Fiberglass? What's that?" It was a lot. It was fun. I mean, he was really smart, so I always liked looking at what he was working on. But yeah, he did Meals on Wheels over there. Because he felt like he was a privileged person with his pension and everything. Like,
Right.
I have a pension, I can afford to eat and everything. I can take care of myself. So I need to make sure I'm giving back to other elderly people in my community.
Right.
So I think he really inspired me like that because he was a very he is a very community oriented man.
Right, community oriented, and then also someone who sought to inform themselves, because you mentioned with Eric at the Orale Boa Heights podcast that he would actually ask you to read the newspaper to him, and that from there you really develop this love for news and informing the broader public. So shout out to your abuelito. And actually, with that in mind, what what is your abuelito's name?
It's Gregorio.
Shout out to Gregorio and the whole abuelito and abuelita community all over LA, all over Cali, everywhere they're to be found. We couldn't be here without y'all. So just, yeah, a moment for you. Now, you also said that Huntington Park was another huge part of this homemaking, we might call it. Huntington Park is such a sweet and sort of underappreciated, underseen part of Southeast Los Angeles. I really love going on Pacific Boulevard to the movies there, and sometimes every now and again to the Tierra Mia that's by there. Tell us about this place as homemaking for you too.
Oh my god, I love Huntington Park. Huntington Park, I would say is one of the best cities in LA County. I think the people there are so nice. I feel like they're so kind. Sometimes I forget how nice people are over there.
Right.
Because, you know, people like they get in your business but in a nice way. Like I think the last time I was there, I was at Crucitas, right? And I was eating on a bench, and then this person went up to me, and they were like, "Hey, I see you eating on the bench. I have a table. I'm not eating anything. I'm just drinking some coffee. Do you want to sit at this table? We can switch." And I was like, "Oh no, it's fine. You know, I don't want to move you from your table. Like, but I really appreciate that a lot." And I'm like, "Oh, that's so Huntington Park."
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I moved there when I was 13. I had, you know, my dad and my stepmom and my stepsister, and I had my siblings too, my sister and my two brothers. Yeah, I would say, how would I describe it? Kind of like what I was saying before. I felt like people kind of made taking care of each other their business. And I really like that a lot because I admire that. I want to be like that. Like, you know, I was having some issues at home, and like my teachers were on it, my coach was on it. Like my coach was like, "Okay, you need running shoes. I got you. Here's some running shoes that don't fit my daughter. Here you go." We needed
At Huntington Park High
Huntington
School.
Park High School, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my coach is amazing. Or like, "Oh, okay, you girls need like racing shoes. Okay, well, here's like one pair of shoes for like three of you to share." So we would like share running shoes, like racing shoes. Um, or like, you know, like let's say we needed like I don't know, anything. Like nobody went hungry. I felt like maybe some people did, but like I felt like if anyone needed anything, your neighbor was there for you. If you needed to like not be by yourself while you're running, your friend would come with you. I felt like, you know, I would always hang out with my friends. We'd always like get into one friend's backyard. Sometimes some of my friends would like play the guitar or something, or they'd play music, or it would just be so much fun. I just liked it so much.
Yeah, one can maybe ride their bicycle through there as I have and see so many different backyards and also just as you said, a general sense of hospitality as the norm. And being in LA, which is so traffic congested, where everybody's in a rush, where you sort of can't go from one spot to the next without looking over your shoulder a little bit if you're a pedestrian or on the pedestrian side, you forget that people can be nice for no reason than just because that's what they want to be. Because that's
Yes.
what makes it a community for them. And I really like Huntington Park for this reason. I don't know if you've been to Tacos El Cholo Tacos yet, but that's a new spot on
Yeah.
Pacific Boulevard. Really great food and also super hospitable place, as in you walk in there, if you tell them you're going to sit down and eat, they go, "We got you. We'll take care of everything for you." And it's so hard to find that just anywhere else.
Yeah, I haven't been to that spot yet, but I've been to the spot that was there before it. It was a Salvadoran spot. The pupusas were amazing. They were like, it felt like you were eating like clouds. Like it was just amazing. It was so, so, so good. And the same thing. They were so nice to us. It was great. I loved, like how you're saying, I like the hospitality. I felt like it's still congested and trafficy over there, like a lot. But when I used to drive over there, I used to have to do this thing called social driving.
Okay.
So when I would commute from where I lived to school, because I like commuted for 2 years to Irvine, I would be down Florence. I'd get my gas, and then suddenly I had to make a left on this very busy street from a small like gas station. So basically, what I would have to do is I'd have to like go and make eye contact with one driver, and then that one driver would be like an older dude. He would like stop, and then he'd look over, and then all the other cars would stop,
Yeah.
and that's how I could get across.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to like smile, wave, and do my whole thing, but I can't do that anywhere else.
Right. Right. I love that. I love the way that they, as other motorists, they got each other. They all know the rhythm because that's also something playing out each day. And I hope that very soon we have more storytelling coming from and for the Huntington Park side, because that spot is so neat and you got to see it, especially if you are a Latino or Latina or Latinx person in this city.
100%, yes.
So great of you to shout them out. And we also mentioned that, okay, there's all this going on for home, but you have, at least over the last couple of years, spoken a little bit regarding this incredible podcast known as The Sellout, one of my favorite podcasts ever. And okay, there isn't like a very lengthy history of podcasts of all time just yet, but still, if you think about it, it's totally fair to say something like that at this point, especially in the oversaturated podcast market. All that in mind, for listeners who don't know this, for listeners who are meeting The Sellout for the first time through this episode, what can we say about what this features and what it entails?
Yeah, okay. I could go on and on about The Sellout. But if you like stories about politics and corruption, yeah, you're gonna love it. I think you like stories about community voices and basically how and why corruption affects people, how it affects you as a as a community member, as a constituent. You should definitely check it out. I think what I loved about it the most is that we got to make it. I wanted to make it sound like Boyle Heights. I wanted to make it for Boyle Heights. I'm not from Boyle Heights, but I really wanted to make sure that we were doing it in a respectful way to our neighbors in Boyle Heights. I wanted to make sure that it felt like it was for them and that we were involving the community as much as possible. Yeah, I felt like a labor of love, right? I was like, okay, if someone's like reporting about Huntington Park, what would I want?
Love that.
What kind of love and care would I want, right? So it was great. I already had a lot of friends that I was able to rely on. They were able to help me, making sure I didn't make anything bad. And yeah, it felt like, again, I had my community, I had my folks to go lead me, guide me, and tell me like what was up. So you can hear a lot of my friends on the podcast. You can hear my friend Mari, and her dad's a mariachi, so he talks about, his experience in Boyle Heights. You can hear my friend Raquel, and she's talking about, her family business that's been there for 50 years and basically how she looked up to Jose Huizar. Oh, I should, before I say anything else, it's about Jose Huizar. It's about this corrupt, well, I guess now I can say he's corrupt, right? Because of he got...
You can get past the allegedly because he's been convicted.
He's been convicted and get past allegedly. The podcast has a million allegedlys in it. But yeah, it's about him, but it's and his corruption. We do talk about the corruption, but it goes past the spectacle. It talks about he was the very first Mexican city council member, and how that was so exciting for people, how people were really excited for that, right? We love representation. We love a good representation story. We love a good story about a guy from the neighborhood making it, right? But it talks about how somebody used that and and exploited that, and also allegedly harmed people, abused people, or allegedly abused people. And yeah, so we talked about the deeper part. We talked to the community. We talked to people that felt disappointed, the people that saw the changes, because this corruption did lead to new developments happening, which is gentrification, essentially. So it's important to see how all these things are interconnected and are played or play into one another, right? it's important to know how these things work. And I also wanted to make sure that, at least for the appropriate parts, that it'd be fun, right? The theme song was a cumbia rebajada, um, made by none other than Eduardo Arenas, who is from Bow Heights, born and raised, and also was an urban planner, but also is the bassist from Chicano Batman. um, so, yeah, I wanted folks to like the music. I love music a lot, and for me, I just like it to set the mood, right? It's like when you're having a party, you want to make sure that the mood is correct.
Iconic theme song, I have to tell you right off the bat. Just iconic, so LA. And I had no idea that the producer was also an urban planner, but that is so great.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I was like, I get into these modes where if I really had thought about it, I would have been like, oh man, I'm asking Sony, because Sony's the parent company of Neon Hum. Like, I'm asking Sony to do a lot. I can't believe I have the nerve to do all this, but I was so much in there. This has to be correct. This has to be right. I didn't even realize what I was asking. I was just like, no, it has to be like this. It has to be like that. We have to get this person. We have to do that. I can be a little bit of a perfectionist sometimes, and I'm not saying the Sellout was perfect by any means, but I get really into like what I want, and then I'll just start pushing and pushing and pushing for it.
Yeah, and I think a lot about the way that this is 21st century storytelling in Los Angeles, a type of storytelling that would have been difficult to achieve just a couple of decades earlier, even way back in the early 2Ks when this kind of storytelling was very much needed in order to inform communities about the policies around them and the policymakers or those who sought to make policy. These kinds of storytelling formats, they would have been game changers. But what we can say now is that for those folks who are looking to get involved in their community, who are also looking to learn about the developments in their community, about the news and the politics and the way that culture is absolutely in between all of these things when they concern our neighborhoods, the Sellout is a prime example of how you can go and find out more. It's really a deep dive into all of the things that make a neighborhood in LA so special. And then it's also a deep dive on how communities are impacted by what are not just political scandals, but scandals for our neighborhood and very much related to the changes, including accelerated changes through gentrification in the current moment for us. So I absolutely recommend that folks get out and listen to that podcast as soon as possible. I will place it right in the show notes for you. And yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I really do appreciate that. Yeah.
Of course. And you also mentioned that you got to connect with friends for this podcast, that it felt like one of these special labors of love, including because you were connecting with folks that you've known for quite some time. And it was really cool for me to hear the inclusion of a community journalist and documentarian such as Eric Huerta of the Orale Boa Heights podcast, because that's what we can basically call a lot of street cred. And I'm curious as to when you first met Eric and this crew, how did it get assembled through friendships that you developed over the course of your own time out here in LA?
Yeah. So I met Eric through LA Taco. We were both running the social media together. I think like when LA Taco barely became a newsroom back in 2018 or something. 2018? Yeah, 2018 I think. So we would meet right there at Crucitas with Eric, and then the other Eric Galindo, who's also in the podcast industry.
Shout out Eric Galindo, legend, living legend.
Yeah, but back then we were just three people hanging out at Crucitas talking about how we're gonna make LA Taco work. So I learned a lot from Eric Huerta. I learned a lot from both Erics. But I think when I brought Eric onto the podcast, I think Eric has, just so much knowledge. And I think also Eric is a really kind and thoughtful person. So I feel like Eric kind of brings a lot of I don't know, just kind of brings a lot of thoughtfulness and kindness into the things that he's saying, and I don't know how else to describe it. So it really was a privilege to have him on. We were walking together, as you could hear in the podcast, in Mariachi Plaza, and we were eating tacos. It was cool. Every time I get to see him, it just feels like it's a great time,
Hey, Los Angeles. I hope you're enjoying this conversation as much as I am. I just want to take a moment to invite you to my Patreon channel, which supports JT the LA Storyteller podcast in more ways than one, and which also provides just a little more from each convo. And of course, this is because it takes a little bit of work to put this podcast together, including research and reaching out to folks and scheduling things, and then studio time, editing time, finally publishing, and then a little bit of marketing time. And the Patreon channel is just the best way to support all of that, to support independent storytelling in LA by JT the LA Storyteller. So I would love your support, and I can give you my word that it's going to be more than worth it. Now, back to the show. Absolutely. So Eric happens to be a Boa Heights native, host of the Orla Boa Heights podcast. And at which point does it occur to you that his input, including featuring him on the Sellout podcast, makes absolute sense? Is that right away, or did it come up as you were brainstorming with your peers or collaborators? When did you realize that, like, oh, we got to get Eric's voice here too?
Yeah, actually, we wanted him to work on it. We wanted him to be in the podcast, to be like working on it. I think, I don't remember exactly what happened. I think Eric was like a little busy or something. But yeah, but we were like, well, Eric has to be in it, in some way. So I think even before it was decided that I was going to be on it, they wanted Eric to be in it.
I see exactly what you mean. Now, to be sure, you also do cite this on the show. The reporting work that the Sellout took was work conducted by yourself, as well as Lexus Olivier Ray and Carla Green. So just to be certain, you were basically investigating as you went along and as you compiled the podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, so we actually had the reporting phase. I forgot how many months that took, but it just kind of felt like Lexus was doing, his own reporting, and then Carla was doing hers, and then I was doing mine, and then like we'd have these weekly like editorial meetings where we just like dump all the reporting that we were getting, right? And then after that it was deciding, okay, which information is going to go into which episode, where are we going to put what into what. It was a whole process. It's like making a movie.
Yeah, of course. Exactly, or roughly how long did it take for the podcast to get fully fleshed out, basically? Because the podcast was officially published around October or November of 2021. But how long before then had you all basically prepped everything?
Yeah, so we had started, I think Neonham reached out to me in summer of 2020. And that's when the first conversation started. And yeah, from the beginning, Lexus, myself, Eric Galindo, and we were on the phone with them. We were talking. We were like, okay, we want to do this, but we want to make it community oriented. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it LA Taco style. And then, they were down. So yeah, that's how it started. So it took like a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half.
Right. I mean, that's so extensive, and you have to confirm with so many different sources. And it's really cool because to think for a moment that you're going from Adelanto, which we mentioned earlier, reading newspapers to your abuelito, all the way out to the city, really investigating actual politics in this second largest city of America, and collaborating with your peers to develop a story for everybody to hear. That is really going a long way, and I just want to take my hat off to you for a moment. I also want to shout out Eric Galindo, especially because podcasting and producing cool podcasts is just what this guy loves to do. It's clear, his record speaks to it, and so a lot of love to Eric Galindo, and I can't wait to feature him on this podcast once again. And shout out to all of these podcast making teams in LA. Absolutely. Now, this is such a fun storytelling format, and I wonder like how it is that you all came up with the binge-worthy aspect of it, or is it just that like that flew in naturally into what you were publishing and reporting? Because as you said, you were gathering all of these stories, and then you had to come up with a plan as to which part went where, right? So obviously you have to begin somewhere. And from that point, I'm curious about how you decided to, include these various community members, and then how you decided to ultimately end up where you did. Because at some point you have to cap everything and you have to finish this 1.5 year long project, obviously. So I'm a little curious about how that went for you all.
Oh yeah, I wish we could just say like, yeah, I just naturally made a binge-worthy podcast, right? That's the dream. No, we had a story editor, Catherine St. Louis, and she's phenomenal. She helped, or she edited our storytelling, and she was like the one that really made sure that the story was like concise. And because as a reporter, you just want to throw everything, and you're like, oh, this is important, that's important, this is a good thing, and if I was left to my own devices, I would have probably added like so many things, that too many tangents, right? And she was really the person that was making sure the story was, how do I say? I was just making sure the story like hit really well. And then we had all these listening sessions. So every time we would like record an episode, do the mixtape, we'd have a listening session. So we invite people from LA Taco. Sometimes I'd invite my cousin who would listen to it on her own and give notes. Because I also think it's really important to involve people that aren't in media to critique your stuff. So I was like, Vanessa, like, what do you think about this? And she was like, actually, she gave me some feedback that was kind of harsh with the first mixtape ever. She was like, Mariah, who is this? Who is this? You sound like some NPR lady. Like, you need to change it. I like, just talk to me or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, it hurt, but
wow. Wow.
She's my older cousin, so she's always been like an older sister to me. So, I thought it was funny, but I did go back to the team and I was like, hey.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to involve your family, to involve people close to you, to involve your friends. Like my friend Maddie is not involved in media, but she reached out to me. We're really close. She's like, Mariah, why didn't you tell me you're doing this story? My dad's a mariachi, and she's been in the mariachi world her whole life. So she's like, I got you. And she came in and she helped, and
Right.
I felt like, I just think it's really important to involve people that are from the community, that are your friends, that love you, and are going to tell you something isn't hitting right for them. So they were also part of the process too.
Right. So from the get-go, inclusivity and accessibility were a huge part of your process through the people that were willing to be there and hold you all accountable to it.
Yeah, because I don't want to make something that's just for other media Latinos, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is a part of why the show is so exciting. This is a part of why I can't wait to share it with our listeners, and I can't wait to point you all to it. Now, going into a little bit of the accessibility and the inclusivity as a huge part of the storytelling process for you, I'm also excited to note to our audience that you're up to more of this, including through a new project, a new publication that is actually known as none other than the LA Public Press. So for those listeners out there who've never heard of LA Public Press, what can you tell us about this new and burgeoning storytelling platform out in Los Angeles that launched just earlier this year, I believe?
Yeah, just earlier this year, I think at the end of January. Yeah, we're called to LA Public Press, and for a lot of different reasons, I'm always like, well, we're the LA Public Press, so we're never gonna have a paywall, never. We're always gonna have great reporting. We're always gonna have great reporting, and always making sure that it's accessible for everybody. Because good news, like news that takes a long time to report, news that is factual, correct, not fake news, right? We want to make sure it's accessible for our communities. It shouldn't just be for people who can pay $200 a year, to get their news, right? News and information should be for everybody, because it's important that we're all able to go be civically engaged, whether that's voting, whether that's holding your city council members accountable in some way, whether that is, all the different various ways. Like maybe there's like a policy that you don't like. Maybe there's something that's impacting you. I think it's really important that folks know about these things, these processes are impacting them, and that they're able to learn about it without having to pay money, right?
Yeah. Now, to be certain, you are also one of the co-founders of LA Public Press.
Yeah, so I am the co-founder of LA Public Press, and then the founder is Matthew Dinoco. Yeah, so we're an audience first newsroom, and that basically means that we actively go out and listen to what people want from us, right? And I really mean that. So myself and Amanda, our engagement producer, surveyed I want to say over 700 people in LA County with an emphasis on people in Southeast LA, South LA, and folks east of the LA River, right? We asked them about what kinds of information that they wanted to get, how they get their news, and basically we actively use all the information to guide our editorial processes. So basically, if we're in an editorial meeting and I'm like, hey, 85% of our respondents, these 700 people, these 500 people for this one survey, say that they really care about housing. Let's do housing stories. That's like the quantitative stuff, right? But then there's qualitative too. So qualitative is when we're actually talking to people and having these deep conversations with them. Excuse me. And so that's where it gets feedback, where people are like, hey, I want to know more. I want to know more about news, but the news is so sad. And I feel re-traumatized. It makes me anxious. Or I feel like they're talking above me. I feel like I'm expected to know all these other things that I don't know about just to read one story. So I feel like I don't know what's going on. So we use feedback like that to help guide, okay, what's our angle gonna be? Well, our audience wants this. Okay, we're gonna tell a sad story. Okay, but who are the people that are working on making this thing better? And in every community, there's always people fighting for themselves, self-advocating, right? Because we don't want to leave people with this paralyzing doom and gloom, right?
Right.
Because that's often not the whole truth anyways. People are always advocating for themselves. And I think a lot of times what I'm learning is that audiences and people in general are good. People want to help. People want to get involved. So people don't know where to put their energy. So if you don't tell them who's doing the work, who's doing stuff, they're going to end up just being sad instead because people are good, right?
Yeah, to me it seems like, especially given where we are as young professionals, I think we know very closely what it feels like to be on both ends. That is, to do some of the storytelling, but also to be involved with some of the storytelling that has permeated out there. So it really gives us a very strong lens into the next stage for storytelling, including through stories or formats such as what you all put together for the Sellout, and including through surveys, just as you pointed out, guiding the work going forward. And to be sure, you said that you are the audience engagement coordinator, or could you just say a little more about your specific title?
Yeah, so I'm the audience director. So I'm in charge of basically making sure that people read the news, whether that's going to be on social media, whether it's going to be on the website, whether they're going to hear about it in a newsletter somewhere else. Also helping out the podcast, people listening to the podcast too. We have Smogland Radio. But yeah, before I get into that though, I really want to talk about what makes us a little bit different.
Yeah.
We are very explicit about our values. I think it's kind of weird, but most newsrooms won't talk about their values. But we have values, and our values is that we think everybody deserves housing, clean water, and all that stuff, right? And we believe as a newsroom that this is going to help inform our coverage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're saying is that these are guiding principles for you all, policies that you basically stand by, and essentially you're identifying core values for you all as people who live in the city.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that they're necessarily policies, but these are things that we abide by, and we kind of are our guiding principles, right? Yeah, so I think we are, our tagline is that we're news for LA people by LA people, and we're a newsroom that's for a more humane Los Angeles.
Wow, I do think that that's a huge deal, because for so long, from my limited understanding of the news culture, there's been this sort of dominant theory that news or reporters or storytelling to this effect has to be removed from the story itself. I think for a time that may have worked and been functional, but I also think that clearly in 2023, in a city like LA, news is all around you, and the way that the city has transformed due to a set of policies, due to a lack of enforcement of other certain provisions, and so on. That's the city that we are also concerned with as we describe what went into making things this way for so many of us. So it sounds to me like it's storytelling for a new moment in LA at a very important juncture for the city, including because of new political leadership and an upcoming election year very soon, and many more changes on the horizon that people need to know about, that people should not be paywalled against.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think as an audience director, that's what makes it so exciting for me because it's like, okay, so these other newsrooms aren't gonna prioritize, my communities, our communities.
Mm,
I'm gonna prioritize us.
mm.
And yeah, uh, I'm gonna prioritize these audiences and I can build a bigger and better audience.
Now, with respect to that, we're talking about audiences, and if you're listening to this, you're an audience member. Shout out to you for tuning into our podcast yet again. And what I want to ask on the audience's behalf is how people out there can get involved with this new publication in LA that is seeking their input. Tell us a little bit about how folks might reach out to you all or participate in some of these surveys if they missed them. Give us the whole nine.
Yeah, I'll give you the whole nine. All right. So you can follow us on all the social medias. You can find us on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Reels, on Threads now. And yeah, you can follow us at LA Public Press. It's just that. And yeah, if you go to the link in the bio, you can find all of our articles. You can find all this stuff. You can also find our survey there. Let me think, what else? Yeah, we're still surveying people. You can also find us, depending on where we go, you can find us at softball games. You can find us at Little League games. You can find us at the YMCA. We definitely want to make sure that we're coming to people and we're not just relying on people to come to us on social media or on our website. Yeah, and yeah, we've gone to coffee shops. We've gone to bike meetups. We've gone to parties. We will just kind of pop up in a bunch of random places.
Actually, that's a big deal. So you heard it here that if there's a little league or a softball game that you may want to invite some new and burgeoning reporters to for this brand new publication in LA, absolutely. Y'all are looking for that.
Yes, please reach out to us. You can hit us up on our social media. You can email us. You can hit me up at Papaya the Mariah. I'm on all the platforms too. And yeah, we would love that. We love interviewing people. We love surveying people. For us, it's an honor. And I don't know, I just get so excited. And when Amanda's out there, and when I'm out there, we've noticed how into it people get. Like people get really into telling us what they want to get from the newsroom, and it just feels like an honor to us. Like wow, people are giving us their opinions. People are taking their time. It just feels like it feels like such a blessing.
And to be certain, is LA Public Press just for the city of LA, or is LA Public Press looking to engage with the county of LA?
Yeah, so LA Public Press, we are for the county of LA because I did it because I love Sellout. I love Southeast LA. So we do have an emphasis on Southeast LA. So that's going to be Huntington Park. That's going to be Bell. It's going to be Cudahy. We also have an emphasis on South LA and anything east of the river, right? But for certain, like all of LA.
Yeah.
We love all of LA. We love LA County. You know, but I want to make sure that we're prioritizing folks that haven't been prioritized by our legacy news outlets.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely going to include the San Fernando Valley just as well very soon, as there are so many changes to LA City Council office seats there. So I've got a good feeling that y'all will be there very soon.
Oh, very soon, very soon. Had a larger staff, we had more capacity, we would definitely be there. But you know, we do have quite a few people there from the San Fernando Valley on our staff.
Yeah, I understand that. And so if you're out in the SFV and tuning into this from there, be sure that you're reaching out to the LA Public Press. Mariah, it has been so much fun chatting with you, and I just want to ask you if there's anything else we should know, anything else we should keep in mind for you or for your work in the days ahead.
Yes, so please, 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 if you can get a chance to listen to the LA Public Press's podcast, Smogland Radio, that would be amazing. Can I plug it? I would love to plug us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, so Smogland Radio is great. It's hosted by Nancy Mesa, who's also in the Sellout.
Hey.
Nancy is an amazing host. Yeah, and we made it for people who are not getting their media needs met by other news orgs, right? Yeah, we are trying to give out useful information to folks. We're trying to give people news in a way that's like fun, that's engaging, but also serious when it needs to be. And we want to make it really community oriented and focused. We have a listener that's giving us some of like the background noise. We do include a lot of the soundscapes of LA.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Our theme song is really good. It's the same person that made my theme song for the Sellout.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
You should definitely tune in and listen.
There's even a renter's hotline.
There's a renter's hotline. Yes. Can also, like, if you have these issues with your landlords, you can listen to that. We also have a zine that just came out.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, but now
I'm so
you mentioned
sorry.
it. No, I forgot to ask, and now that you mentioned it, I don't have to ask. Please tell us more.
Yeah. So our audience data said that people really cared about housing issues and renting issues. So Carla Green made a story all about how to get your landlord to do their job. And their job is to do those repairs that they've been lagging it on, right? So she made a whole thing on how to get your landlord to make those repairs. And then we're like, okay, we need to translate this. We need to translate it into Spanish. So we did that. And then we got feedback. Somebody was telling us, like, hey, can you actually make a print version of this so we can pass it out to tenants? And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. Let's make it cute. So we got Allison Yee to go make our illustrations. So they did that, and the illustrations are so good. Like, it's like very Frog and Toad coded, you know? I was like, wow, these illustrations look like they belong in some Barnes and Noble book. Like, I feel so like privileged right now. I love it. So people keep asking us, like, how much are they? Where can I buy one? I'm like, no,
Right.
We're the LA Public Press. We're not going to be selling this. So we're giving them out for free. We have our first 200 copies that I just printed last Friday. And if folks want to go, like, you know, hit us up, but we will be distributing them. Please stay tuned. Stay tuned on our socials and all that. So we should start distributing them next month. So I'm so excited. It feels like we just put something out into the world. My best friend was there when we were pinning them. She's like, oh my God, Mariah, it looks like you, I feel like I just witnessed you give birth to like all your zine babies.
You're a zine mom now.
I'm a zine mom now. So yeah, I can't wait to go pass out these zines. I'm very excited. So stay tuned on how you can get one.
Yeah, the suspense is on. So now you absolutely have to keep up with the LA Public Press via all of your socials, because you have to know when they finally make the first drop. Now, you did mention that the zines are free and for the public because this is LA Public Press. So it's all on the LAPP. Is that like a good acronym for you all?
Yeah, it's all on us, on LA Public Press. But yeah.
Now, it's all on LA Public Press, but if you happen to be an angel donor out there and you're one of these real hot shots in the city of LA or somewhere in the state of Cali, which you obviously know that we love, given all of this podcast episode's discussion, do reach out and make sure that you're donating and supporting projects and good public works such as this. I think you might agree.
Oh, yes, I would love it. If somebody out there is like, yes, I want to just like love up on LA Public Press financially, we would love that. We're also a 501c3, so we're a nonprofit. And yeah, you can go to our website at lapublicpress.org, and there's a donate button if you want to donate. I would love to make more of these zines, but yeah, I would really appreciate that a lot.
Mariah, I really appreciate your joining me for JT, the LA Storyteller podcast today. It's been so much fun, and I look forward to seeing more of your and your collaborators' work very soon.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's Jimbo times.